As a reminder, today, our goal is to understand the role and responsibilities of the school site council and what are the steps for developing, monitoring, and evaluating your plan. Why is a school site council required? Because we accept funds, Title I funds, that require a school site council, which means it has to be a group that is representative not just of school staff, but also has parents and community members. What is it? Apologize for the thing there. School site council is a group of elected people, as you are. Many of you in the room are the parents elected by other parents to serve and represent on the school site council. And your main role is to develop, evaluate, and monitor the school plan for student achievement. So what are your roles, right? Again, you review annually and update based on data. You look at the expenditures, you look at who was in charge of what, the programs that you used. You listen to advice of the School English Learner Advisory Committee, or ELAC. That is required. Some schools have an ELAC and a school site council. Some schools have voted to combine the two. Either way, an agenda item every month should be feedback from the English Learner Advisory Council. Yes. Sorry. Judith, interpretation. Okay, we recommend the plan to the school board for approval. And the other task you have is to develop a comprehensive school safety plan that will typically take place in February, March, and our coordinator of risk management will come and do that work with you. So legal requirements that you have to do every year. One is look at the data. How are our students progressing in English language arts, in math, in science, in English language development? You need to look at the effectiveness of our current improvement strategies, identify key goals and improvements, set up timelines, who's responsible for what, and then keep monitoring to make sure that the things you said you were going to do are happening. And if they are not, why? And or if you're doing them, but they're not achieving the results you were hoping for, why? So it's a constant monitoring of the work we're trying to do. You review, you send it to the board. And then, as I said, it was approved. The plans you have now in place at your school sites were approved in May of last year. So you are in implementation mode. And we are going to talk about your first meeting to review the data and see, based on what we planned in May, the work we've done up until now, is what we're doing working, or do we need to make some changes for our kids? So additional agenda items are drafting or reviewing your bylaws. Again, your bylaws are about how you work together, terms of service. You decide everyone only serves for 1 year. You may decide they serve for 2 years. You may elect alternates to make it simpler if you have someone who has to leave for some reason, so that it's an easy way to keep your committee going. Again, advisory committee input. The required input is ELAC, our English Learner Advisory Council. In your bylaws, you may ask for input from your other committees. If you have an APAC, your African American Parent Advisory Council, you may want to put that in to give some feedback. If you have the special needs family support group members, if you have a group on your site, you may want feedback from that group at each of your meetings. That would go in your bylaws.
Quick question.
Yeah.
If the term for the parent volunteers or the teachers or what have you is 2 years, but there's not an interest for parents, is there ability to serve more than 2 years, or do you take a break and then come back?
That again, you could decide amongst yourselves in your group, and you could put that in your bylaws.
Okay.
I served for 2 years. I'm willing to do it again. And there's only 3 other people who are willing. Come on down, right?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Of course, we're always trying to get more people involved. And sometimes through work commitments and other things going on, it's difficult. So, but our goal is, and we'll talk about it later in the presentation, we have to have parity on our committees, right? And the minimum size of a committee is 10. 5 have to be parent or community. 5 have to be school staff. Okay, so if you have 3 over here and 5 over here, you're not in sync. And so you don't have equal partnership. So we really want to work. And you all have friends and you can say, hey, come on, come to, it's like 5 meetings a year. Come with me. It's not so terrible, right? So that's part of our work too, is to encourage others to join us. We talked, homeschool compact parent involvement policy. I can move this thing out of the way. Like when part of my screen is being blocked. Just get rid of that. Okay, better. You probably talked about it back to school night at your first coffee with the principal, but essentially the homeschool compact is we as the teachers promise to do our part, parents, we promise to do our part, students promise to do their part. All 3 parties sign it. You review it each year to make sure that it actually covers the things that you want your 3 groups to commit to. Parent involvement policy is what does Family University and all the workshops and committees look like at your school so that all parents feel welcome and part of the community. And then uniform complaint procedures are if they're in place in case you feel your rights have been violated. We will have a presentation on that. We have one every year, but essentially as an example, if I'm the parent of an English learner, my child has a right to English language development instruction every day. If I'm at a school site and say, you know, my child hasn't had English language development. He's a 3rd grader. I've never seen it. I would be a uniform complaint, right? You would say, hey, the school isn't doing its job, right? So just making sure that you're aware of the federal things we are required to do and provide for our students. It keeps us in check, right? To make sure that the school district is offering all the things that it should. Good so far? Okay, now we're getting to the new part of the presentation that some of you now haven't heard twice. We'll get this going. Oh, and training is what we're doing today. So check that off your list. We get that one done. So what the school site council is not. It's not a policy-making body. That's what the board does. It is not a political organization. We're not going to talk about who we're voting for. We're not going to get together to plot the next board overturn. That's not what our role is. It's not a personnel committee. You have issues with the plant manager or with your teacher or with an aide on campus. Take that up outside of these meetings. That's not what this is about. It is not a grievance committee. It is not a place to come and complain about everything the principal's ever done that I hate, or everything that this person has done that I hate. It is not a school management committee. We've hired a manager. It's the principal. Okay, that is not what this group is for. It is not a fundraising committee. That is PTA. That is outside of this group. And it is not an extension of the PTA or parent club. It has a very narrow focus, and we'll talk about that some more. And, oh, there we go. Okay, so let's talk about the plan for student achievement. So again, and I started talking about this during my tap dance. Okay, so there's no state mandate for our LCAP funds, or local control and accountability plan funds, to be in our plans, but we do include them. Okay, we want our school plans to be aligned with our LCAP, which is our district plan. And so the template can be modified to include both, and we did. And that's what I was explaining before. We have state funds, we have federal funds. Title I is federal. It supplements what we're already supposed to be doing for all kids. But despite our best efforts, if we have a lot of students who are in need, we apply for Title I and agree to use those funds to raise the bar for everyone. So everyone is successful. So, as I said, School Site Council has decision-making over the use of funding through the consolidated application process, which is a fancy way of saying Title I. Because believe it or not, I have to apply for Title I funds every year. We are eligible for them, but we have to apply. And by applying, we say, if you give us these funds, we will use them for this reason. And that's why you may have heard your office manager or your principal, oh, I'd love to, you can't buy that with Title I. Like, oh, we'd like to do that, but we can't get that for Title I because there are rules about how it's to be used. And Title I is, if you think of it, it's more a program than a funding source. It is an intervention program for kids who are struggling. It's to raise the bar for all kids. It is not about, I want an Elmo in my classroom. That is not what it's about. It's about looking at data and how do we help all of our kids improve. And then has advisory input related to LCAP and LCFF funding, right? Again, the state is funding to run our schools, to teach math to all kids. The federal funds are to supplement for those who are not being successful even with these funds. Okay, so here's the 7 steps. You look at the data, you measure the effectiveness of your strategies based on that data, identify goals and key improvements, you define your timelines, recommend it to the board, implement, monitor, and go around again, and again, and again. You might do this 4 times in a school year, right? It's a continually moving process. So the first one, analyzing student data, right? It has to be based on state achievement data, our LPAC scores, our SBAC scores, our local benchmark assessments such as iReady, right? That we have all that data to look at how our children are doing. Number 2, we look at that data, we talk to our staff, we do observations in classrooms, we look at our documents and say, is it working, right? Like right now we have iReady that we've adopted. We did our first screener at the beginning of the school year. We'll do another assessment in November, and we're going to look for growth, right? We're always looking for growth. We're going to talk to our advisory committees. Like if we look at our growth and we see everybody's growing, but I don't see the same level of growth with, let's say, our English learners. We need to talk about that. What's happening there? Let's take a look at our LPAC data and see, are our children growing in language, but it hasn't yet translated to math? How do we make that connection? Okay, then you identify your goals and your key improvements, right? We want 100% of our kids scoring MET, right? Standard MET on the SBAC. We want 100% of our kids getting to a 4 on the LPAC. What are measurable, what are attainable goals we can set on our way to that? Are we at 100% yet? Have y'all seen the data? We're not at 100% yet. We have work to do, right? So what can we do from here to get us to there? And how long do we think it's going to take us to get there? How do we do that work? So then we get into timelines and personnel and expenditures. Yes, Daniela.
Question in the chat. It's
Sure.
from Tamara. Is there funding available for higher achieving students to continue to grow? And her other question was, what about children who are already meeting state standards? How are we supporting those students?
Great question. Again, remember when I told you we have multiple buckets of funds? Title I is specifically for kids who are not meeting standard and who need additional support. We have other funds within our LCAP. There's funding set aside for gifted students, for kids who need acceleration, enrichment, right? Who may already have met the standards. In addition, earlier when it said funds we receive through the consolidated application, Title I is one of the funds. We also receive Title II, which is for professional development for teachers and administrators, Title III for English learners, and then Title IV gives us flexibility for a well-rounded education, for safe and healthy students, and for 21st century learning. And with those Title IV funds, we also provide services and extras to the sites for kids who are already meeting benchmark and who are gifted. So it's there, but you won't see it in Title I. Any other question on that?
So then those types of questions would be answered outside of an SCC meeting?
Yes, we have a gifted and talented parent task force. That would be something you could bring to DPAC. We've often made that a district level conversation because it affects all sites.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking questions.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so most of you don't ever get into the weeds to see actually what the plan looks like, because by the time it's done, it's about a 100-page document. But you want to be aware of what are the strategies we said we do, right? For instance, most schools pay for instructional assistants out of Title I, right? And they help implement intervention programs for kids. Some are before school, some are after school, some are during school. You have a right to ask, is it working, right? Are our kids making progress? If so, yes, let's keep doing what we're doing. If not, is it a training issue? We need to help build the capacity of our aide. Is it a scheduling problem? Is it, oh, we've had this position for 6 months, but we haven't been able to fill it? That's a problem. Do we need to move those funds elsewhere? So it's a constant conversation. And I know a lot of sites, we have an IA, they move on. Or they're a 3-hour IA and another site opens a 5-hour position. So that person moves and then we're constantly adding new staff. So that is a concern and that's something that sites have to deal with and figure out how you're going to use those funds. Okay, then you recommend your plan to the board. You don't have to worry about them not recommending it because yours has been approved. So you are good to go right now. We are in the stage now of just monitoring and making sure it's doing what we said we wanted it to do. The board adopts it, approves or disapproves, and then certifies that the plans are consistent with our LCAP, which is consistent with all of the federal laws, all of our state laws, and the superintendent signs, yes, we promise we are following all the rules. And if you've ever been through a federal program monitoring review, the state comes in and monitors us. And I've been through it with this district twice now, where they go through all of our documentation, and Rogers and Green and who else was FDR have had the luxury and fun of being one of the sites that were audited. So we go through everything, show them everything. And we have come through with flying colors 2 times. So we're on it. We're doing it right. But that's why I want to keep this training going so that we keep doing things correctly. So here we are. We are implementing the SPSA and we are monitoring implementation. Your first meeting in October will be your first opportunity to monitor where we are with your plans. Okay, mid-year changes, as I've stated, your plan is approved in May. On the very next day, you might get another piece of data and start making some changes. That's okay. That's what you document that in your school site council agenda and your minutes, and you keep that moving. It's a living document. It is constantly changing throughout the year, unless everything's going fantastically and exactly as you planned, which I have yet to see happen anywhere in my life, but I'm hopeful one day we'll get there. But you can make changes throughout the year. But again, it is a committee approval, right? Now it may come from your TOSAs may come in, your language arts specialist, your math TOSA may come in and say, here's the data, here's what we've worked on. We met with the teachers, here's their recommendation. Then the committee doesn't have to do all the figuring out of what to do. The committee gets to ask questions, give feedback, say, I'm not entirely convinced. Could you show me some other data? But I also say this because I don't want you to think that now I'm going to send you home with a bunch of data packets to analyze, right? That's not, we're not trying to give you that work. It's, you're there as a board, right? You are approving the work that we've hired a principal, assistant principal, and teachers and TOSAs to do. Okay, so if this is our cycle, so May of 2024, it was recommended to the board. August, September, we've already started implementing, whether you knew it or not, all the things that are happening in the classrooms. The plan is in order, but your job in September was just to fill your boards, right? If you had 3 openings for your parents, you had to fill those, have your elections. If you had it on the staff side, same thing. In October, we're going to take a look at some data. And you're going to analyze it and see how we're doing. We're going to do it again in December, and then in January, and then in March, and then in April, because different data drops at different times during the year. That's the reason you meet. Look at student data, compare it to what we planned, adjust as needed, see you next meeting, right? That's what the purpose of these meetings are. And then again, also in those meetings, we identify goals and key improvements. Do we need to tweak it? Were we way off base? Are we close? And then this 1, 2, and 3 goes around and around and around. We do it in October, then we do it again in December. And then we come back in January looking at different, we just keep analyzing the data at our meetings. with the goal of May 2025, you're submitting it again for approval with your most up-to-date changes for your plan. And every year it gets approved in May for the following year, which was new this past year, shifted that. Okay, so this is where our scheduling has changed this year in that I am helping facilitate district-wide what we're doing each month. Taking that stress off of principals to meet with you and your chairperson. What should we talk about this month? What we talk about is the data that just came in, right? So again, as I said, in September, you had your back to school night, your annual Title I meeting, you're having coffee with the principal, you're getting everything established, you're having your elections. Then in October, your first meeting. And at your first meeting, you're going to take a look at, sorry, this thing is driving me mad. If you haven't talked about the LCAP, you're going to take a look at it to see, does our plan line up with the LCAP? And then also look at goal 1 and goal 2. Goal 1, remember all these signs we have posted all around the district? Academic achievement. Like how are we doing overall? Have we looked at our CASP data? How did our kids do on LPAC, CASP, science, all of those things? And then we also will have much fresher data because we'll have our iReady data available from our first diagnostic, the universal screener that the kids took, right? And the schools with all the teachers are meeting on September 26th to go through that data. And so your school team can bring that data to the school site council meeting and say, okay, guys, here's where we are. Here's what we're doing. We can't compare growth during this school year yet, except to look at where were we last year at this time? Are we in better shape? Are we seeing that kinders who left are now in first grade and we're seeing that, okay, we know where we are. We've got some work to do. What are our plans to get there, right? Same with, well, goal 1 is the everybody goal. How are we doing? And goal 2 is access and equity. Is everybody achieving as they should? And goal 2 is where Title I funds live, right? Because it's all about supplemental. Goal 1 is everybody. State pays us to open our doors, hire teachers, hire administrators, teach math. We do it to the, as best as we can. Goal 2 is more about, hey, we've got some kids who are struggling. How can we supplement and make sure that they're doing well? In December, I talked about in the cycle, in December, we're going to look at goal 3, which is parent and student engagement. We're going to look at attendance, chronic absenteeism, behavior. How are we doing? Because guess what? If the kids don't come to school or the kids are out of school for behavioral issues or disrupting class, we can't impact goal 1 or goal 2, right? Now, goal 3 is not funded out of Title I funds. That is not supplemental. That is core program, having positive behavior support systems in place, getting our kids to come to school. But we can't impact goal 2 with Title I if we don't have kids in school. So that is still a purview of the committee to talk about how are we doing on attendance. And then in January, we'll have the second iReady data coming in. And then we'll be able to compare September's data to January's data. And we sure hope we're seeing more green in January than we saw in September. And if we're not, that's a conversation for your team. What's happening? Maybe we got to go back to goal 3 because that one group of kids isn't achieving because 45% of them have been absent 12 days, right? So there's our issue. They haven't been in for teaching. If our attendance is not a problem, but kids aren't moving, we have to think about what's other reasons that might be happening. How do we support? How do we intervene? That is what the purpose of the committee is. And again, your team, your school team will come to that meeting with recommendations based on the day-to-day they had with the teachers and the principal's knowledge of walking classrooms and observing what's happening and having, that information and then sharing that with you. And then you can ask questions and you can give feedback. That's the purpose of the meeting. So again, goal 1, and here's where I found in working more closely with school site councils last year, some of our goals seemed kind of nebulous. Everything in the plan was everybody will grow by 5 percentage points. Everybody will get better. I don't know what that means. I don't know how to act on that. So I've made some suggestions and I'm going to show you some examples. In this case, Goal 1 is increasing academic achievement. So here's an example of a goal for English language development that I think is attainable. Maybe not this year, but I think we need to set our goals in place such that we can get there. For English learners, let's make a goal of, by the end of 24-25, 80% of our fifth graders are going to hit an LPAC 4. 80% of our fifth graders have been with us since kindergarten. It's year 6 for them. They should be reclassified by now, right? I say 80% because we have late arrivers, we have newcomers that come in every year, and we have some children who just need more time, right? Research states that to learn and master a new language takes anywhere from 4 to 7 years, right? We're setting a target of 5 years. Some of those kids need year 6 and 7. Language is not easy. How many of you have taken a world language and been like, dear God, how am I ever going to learn French, right? Or Chinese or Spanish or whatever it was. Imagine being a child for whom you don't get a choice, right? You came here, English is not your home language, but guess what? This country, that's the language of success, right? And so imagine being a child for whom language is challenging and they have to meet these goals. So we give room for that, but 80% should make it. Are we at 80% of our fifth graders right now receiving a 4 on LPAC? No. But what we set here is some goals for the teachers, and we looked at scale score points. If you're familiar with either the LPAC or the CASP, they get scale score points that identify them as a level 1 or a level 2 or a level 3. So if a child comes in as a level 1, they have a long way to go to get to level 4 on the LPAC, right? If they enter as a level 3, the distance is much shorter. In looking at that, we need our kids to move anywhere between 27 and 88 scale score points every year. So I said, let's set a goal of a minimum of 30 scale score points for every child for every year.
How attainable is that actually?
Good question. Well, let's think about it. I set it for 80% of fifth graders to hit a score of 4, not to say that our fifth grade teachers now hold all responsibility for moving our children. What I'm setting there, and by setting a target for every year 30 scale points, is that the pre-K teacher needs to accomplish that. The kinder teacher needs to, the first grade teacher, the second grade, everybody has a part in that. And when we look at our data, if we're not seeing that movement, again, it causes questions. A lot of those kids been absent. Are we using our actual ELD program with fidelity? Are we teaching our ELD program every day? What's happening and what can we do? So I believe
I just wanted to clarify that you're not putting that 80% responsibility of fifth graders meeting that classification score of 4 on those fifth grade teachers. Obviously, it's progressive when they start in kinder
Correct.
through first, so the responsibility is on at each grade level.
yes.
So is that minimum of 27 to whatever score points you said? I don't remember the high end, but is that per grade level or is that just for fifth grade? Is that what the goal
No,
is set
that is
for now?
per grade level. That is
Okay.
every year those children are in school.
Okay, thank you.
So you may be a fifth grade teacher and you've got a bunch of kids who've been with us since kindergarten and they're all still sitting at level 2. Is my expectation that you fifth grade teacher are going to work a miracle and move them, 300 points this year? No. This is a long-term goal to give everyone responsibility and a check, right? Because if we look at that data every year and go, something's happening in second grade, I don't know what it is, but they're going like this, and then it just levels off. So what do we need to do in second grade to help our kids move? So what I want to see is that's the goal. That's where we're aiming. We want to get close to it, right? Every year we want to get better at it. One day down the road in the next 3 or 4 years, yes, I expect 80% of our fifth graders to hit a level 4. I would love to see it this year, but I'm realistic, right? So we have to make sure. And in the work that I've been doing right now in middle school, we are adopting a new ELD program because the one that we have has expired. So we need a new one. And in doing some of that work, we realized there's some gaps in the ELD program we've been using at middle school. So it gives us the opportunity to choose a better one. Because again, is it the teaching? Is it the tool? Is it the attendance? Is it the was there a long-term sub? Were there rotating subs coming through? I have no idea when I look at the data. So the data is not a judgment. It is a launch point for asking questions. What's happening? What can we do? Can we tweak this? We made 10 points growth last year. Can we get to 15? Can we get to 20? Can we get there at every grade level so that by the time they get to fifth grade teachers might have, I got 3 kids I really got to focus on to get them over into reclassification. And I have 2 late arrivals who are perfectly on track and they're going to reclassify when they get to 7th grade. Right? But we're not there yet. But to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, this feels much more tangible and achievable than everybody's going to grow by 5%. I
It
don't,
makes much more sense. This one makes much more sense on a group scale to be like, okay, individually, like grade by grade, this is what we want to see. I think that's more realistic.
great. Thank you. It's good to have, again, I need checks because in my mind, it sounded great, but sometimes, maybe not. So I appreciate the feedback. Okay, so goals for goal 2. This is access and equity. And again, most of our plans, everybody's going to grow by 5%. It's very vague. Here's a suggestion I've made to the principals. First of all, again, and 5th grade teachers, don't feel like I'm harping on you, but this is the goal. There's more than one reclassification criterion for reclassification. The second one is they have to meet the academic goals of their peers, right? They have to demonstrate meeting the academic criterion, which for us is the top 50% of near met on SBAC, or grade level on iReady, or grade level on one of our benchmark assessments. If we set a goal that everybody's going to grow by 5% and everybody's here and our English learners are here, will the English learners ever catch up? No. The goal for the group that is struggling must be steeper and more accelerated so that as they're growing, this one's growing this much, this one's growing this much, the achievement gap will close, right? So if I'm saying all of my kids need to grow by 5 percentage points on the CASP, right? My English learners then, I need them to increase by 10 percentage points if I'm going to close that gap. What does that mean? Well, why do you have those instructional aids at your sites? They're there to support the kids who aren't meeting the goal and they need an accelerated path. So what is it that we're doing? Do we do the same thing we do for everybody? I hope not. I hope it's presented differently. I hope it's repeated. I hope it's a preview and a review. I hope we have strategies in place that will help move those children more rapidly. Of course, we want everybody to just take off like that, but to be realistic, if we're on a path of 5% growth as our bare minimum, we need to make sure those struggling groups are on a steeper growth. So we set those goals and then we look at it and see if we're doing that. So on iReady, I would hope, my greens are growing as they should, and then my English learner greens are growing like this. Woo, look at them go. It may be they're still behind, but they're catching up ground, right? And that's what we're aiming for. So again, I hope this feels more, I feel like I could get my arms around this. Like, okay, this is something I could look at each data point and go, oh, yeah, okay, it's working. We're doing that. Or, it hasn't, but are my struggling students dealing with other things? Like, do I need to fill in the attendance gap? Do I need to tackle the social emotional gap? Are there things that need to also be put in place to help those students move? Conversation for your site. I don't know your specific circumstances. That's what you need to be working on.
Hi, Miss Julie.
Yes.
Lydia Castro.
Hi.
I just wanted to add that not all children reclassify in the 5th grade. We host
Correct.
ceremonies yearly to honor those kids, like in the 2nd, 3rd, or wherever grade they are, to honor their achievement that they've reclassified.
Thank you, Lydia, for pointing that out. Yeah, you can reclassify any year. Remember, the research says 4 to 7 years. Some children might reclassify in 4 years. Some are language sponges, or they come from a country where they are highly educated in their home language and the transfer is very quick. So yes, thank you, Lydia, for pointing out. That is not the where they should reclassify. That's where the last of them should reclassify. We're hoping kids are reclassifying all along the way. Thank you.
Yeah, Lydia, I actually saw someone reclassify at the kinder, promotion. So there are reclassifications that happen sooner. So I
Yeah.
think what Julie was trying to say is that that's if we can get them reclassified before fifth grade, great. That would be even better. But at the minimum, we want them to try and reclassify by fifth grade. Am I accurate in stating that?
Absolutely, 100%. And our kinders who reclassify typically are ones who were terrified at their first initial LPAC and didn't say a word. And then suddenly when they're confident and comfortable and acclimated to school, it all comes out. And I'm not going to negate fantastic work of our kindergarten teachers, right? Because kindergarten is language, 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 building language. That's what we do. So yes, again, at fifth grade would be the last exit, we would hope. We'd like to see it earlier if that's where the child is, and at maximum before they leave us in eighth grade. That's our goal. So we want them to go to high school ready to take all the extracurriculars, all the classes they can, and not be still in English language development unless they were a newcomer to us in eighth grade, which we get, right? And that makes sense. Okay, so just to review your school site council composition, it has to be half staff, half parents and community. Minimum number is 10, right? So, and in the staff side, the principal has to be a member. Principal doesn't get out of it. Principal can't delegate it. Principal is a member. Teachers need to be the majority, and then you can have one other. Might be classified staff, might be your office manager, might be an SSA, might be anyone on your staff. Parents and community can be parents at the site, could be community members who are actively engaged in your site. The only thing is, if you are a parent who also works for the school, you count as staff. You don't count as a parent. All right, selection of SSC members. Hopefully, I know some of your sites are still actively recruiting, but essentially parents elect parents, teachers elect teachers, so that you are having an opportunity to vote for who's representing. Classified votes for classified. You can do it in a meeting like this and we hand out ballots. You can do it online. You can do whatever works for your site, as long as you are notifying all members of that group that they have an opportunity to serve on school site council. You can nominate yourself. Again, parent members can't be employees of the school. You count as an employee. And then you can, as I said, you might opt. Let's say you're a super lucky school and you have 10 parents who want to be on school site council. You could elect the other 5 to be alternates, right? They may not vote, but they can fill in if someone has to leave, right? I pray we get to the day when you've got 10 people fighting to be on school site council and you have to actually give speeches and get elected. But one day, right now, we're just happy we can find 5 volunteers willing to serve. The principal, as I said, must be there. The principal cannot veto the will of the group, right? The principal steers and brings context and information, but the group has to work with consensus, right? Understanding, here's what the data is telling us, here's what we've been doing. Let's all come to some agreement on our next steps. The chairperson, lest anybody's interested or terrified of being the chairperson, but essentially runs the meeting. That's all, and helps the principal prepare the agenda. It's not a full-time job. It doesn't require 100 hours of work. It's just helping move the meeting along, making sure we're following our bylaws, and then ultimately that person will sign the plan before it gets sent off to the board for approval. Okay, just basically verifying that yes, we have a committee, and yes, we followed the rules, and yes, we're in agreement with this plan. Again, bylaws are not required, but I highly recommend them. Highly recommend them as things just to help guide your meetings. Rules of order. I come from an LA Unified background where, committees were gigantic and we followed Robert's rules and you had to, ask to make a motion and then have that motion approved. And I don't like to run meetings that way. Those are very formal. Some schools might need it just because you don't have that trust and community built yet. So it's there as a tool, but it can be a little looser. We're just talking about what's best for our kids. But I do recommend that you evaluate your bylaws to make sure they're working as you'd hoped. We also have a code of ethics about behavior, I think it's really good for each council to review at the beginning, just to make sure we're all in the same spot. It's all about the best interest of children. It's not about the best interest of parents. Okay, we want to put that first and foremost on our list. It's guided by our mission statements. We act within our role. As I said, our role is governing Title I funds. PTA has a different role. We keep things separate, right? And you can be a member of PTA and a member of school site council, but you have different governing rules for PTA than you do for school site council, right? Let's see what else is on here. It's a long list. We have a lot of in our code of ethics. Maintaining high standards of integrity, how we behave and treat each other with respect. Allow for diverse opinions. They might not all agree. That's okay. And the goal of the work of the principal and the chairperson is to help facilitate a conversation where we can come to some agreement. And again, we want it to be positive. It is not a name calling. And I hate to bring this up, but I've witnessed it. Okay, so part of our role in a school site council is developing a community that can work together, right? Because these are important decisions about our kids. Accepting the consensus of the council. If I don't agree, but 9 others do. Okay, it goes, right? You have to be able to live with that. You respect some of the confidential nature of things that are discussed, not disclose that. Again, you limit the discussions to matters of concern to the school community as a whole. We talk about students, we talk about their data, we talk about how we're improving it. There are times and places for teachers to talk to the principal about materials they want for the school site. That can be at a staff meeting. There are times and places for parents to have conversations about a one-on-one situation with their child and the teacher outside of the school site council meeting. That is not what it's for. Using your established communication channels. If we've all agreed that the chairperson's going to send out an email with the agenda 3 days beforehand, we're not going to have a back channel of emails between 2 members with somebody else because we're not in agreement. We're all keeping this neat and tidy. Declare any conflict of interest. Unless any of you are board members for iReady or some of the programs we've purchased, I don't think that's going to be a problem. You don't get any money for this. Sorry. It's a student council or school site council involvement is purely volunteer. The Green Act is a rule that we do have to follow in that we post our agenda 72 hours ahead of time. It's an open and public meeting, right? We have to tell where it's happening. We can't say, everybody, the meeting's at Julie's house at 4 o'clock. Ileana, the meeting's across the street, and try to get her to go to the wrong spot, right? No, it has to be open to everyone. The agenda needs to be posted. One of the things we're working on this year, like I've already told you the October agenda, right? There's no hiding. We have data that's come in September and October. We're looking at our iReady data. Every site, that's your goal at the school site council meeting. You're going to revisit your goals and you're going to tighten up your plan. Okay, but we want to make sure that all parents hear that. And so if they're interested, the meeting isn't just for the elected members. Anybody can come. They can't vote if it comes down to a vote, but they can certainly give their opinion. Agendas and minutes are required. We have documentation. So your secretary or whoever you elect has to take minutes. It's not and then Andrea said, and then Sharice said, and then it's more like we discussed, we looked at our iReady data. We noticed that there was growth in language arts, but perhaps not as strong in math. We decided we would take a look at blah, 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 blah. The meeting ended at such and such time. It's not a blow by it. It's just general conversation. So next steps, October is your first meeting. And you're going to look at data. You're going to measure the effectiveness of your current strategies, and you're going to update your goals and key improvements if needed. And that gets us to our next step. That is your training. You are complete. Do you have any questions after all? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Karen. Any questions about that? No.
Feels official.
Feels official. Okay, nobody ran out of the door going, nobody told me this was what I signed up for. So that's good. Okay, it's
I handle it, so far.
It is an important job. It is not a full-time job. It is a 5 or 6 times a year kind of job. Come together, look at data, see how we're doing, adjust if needed, monitor again next. Not too hard, right? So now you can all go back. If any of you are at a site that doesn't have enough parents and you can find a friend to come join you. Maybe, or invite them, just come to a meeting, see what it's like. It's not that bad. Right? And then if you really want to have fun, you go to your school site council meeting and you say, I want to go to the district level meeting. Those are the ones that I run, the DPAC, right? Which is, I encourage members of each school site council to come to the DPAC meeting so you can share what's happening at your school and you can learn what's happening district-wide and you bring it back. So we have this nice cycle back and forth. Carrie knows because Carrie's volunteered to join us in there. I can't see who's online, but we have our board. I heard, I'm not sure if Giannina's on here, but she's our president. And we,
Yeah, and then she has a question, a comment.
oh, please,
She says, thank you, Ms. Julie. This was very informative and helpful.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. I've kept you over 3 minutes. Thank you for persevering through our technical difficulties and have a wonderful day and good luck with your school site councils. Thank you, thank you.